What's up, Jip?
You know, not a thing.
Not,
Not
not a
a
thing.
stinking thing.
You know what? It felt almost odd to be recording another episode today because I feel like we just recorded like it feels like forever ago, but also not at the same time.
Yeah, I think we're stuck in like a flat time loop right now where everything is
we're
just
trying to
happening simultaneously and nothing's
we're,
happening all at the
we're
exact same
trying to
time.
flatten the curve, but at the same time, time is flattening out as well.
Yeah. It's all relative, man. What
Yeah.
I learned from that classic movie Deep Blue Sea,
Ah,
about the
yes.
relativity of time.
Starring Mace Windu.
If you haven't seen Deep Blue Sea, I would highly recommend it because we get some really great, relativity explanation from LL Cool J in that, where he
Indeed.
describes the passage of time in terms of relativity. When you have your hand on a hot stove, it feels like a million years, but when you've got your hand on a hot woman, uh, it goes by in a split second. So there you go. There's your LL Cool J philosophy for the day.
Fun fact about this is a personal fun fact about Deep Blue Sea. The first script that I wrote for a short film that got produced was actually I had the help from Cardi Talkington, who wrote the screenplay for Deep Blue Sea.
Holy cow. That's a weird
Yeah,
notch to have on your belt.
it's a very weird thing. He actually expressed to me his displeasure with how the screen version came out compared to what he wrote for the film. But
Well,
you
I
know,
don't know
I
why you would feel that way because it's probably the best movie I've ever seen. So,
it is really is top notch. Um, so welcome to Force Cult, a Star Wars podcast. If this is your first time because you've been stuck at home in self isolation for a while, like we have, maybe you have just been exploring the outer regions of podcasts these days, and you came upon us. Who knows what you have discovered? Or maybe you're like me and you said, one podcast isn't enough, and you decided to start a second podcast while you were in quarantine.
double duty.
Double podcast duty for sure. I'm Travis, joined by my co-host Jip. Good day to be with you, brother, as
Hey, man,
always.
it's a beautiful day here in the Portland metropolitan area. Too bad I can't go outside and enjoy it.
Right, right. Yeah, we took a drive just the other day just to escape, not have to be around people, but to escape. And definitely felt weird going to the grocery store yesterday under apocalyptic conditions of everybody wearing gloves and face masks, and having to stand 6 feet apart. And anytime somebody comes down an aisle, instead of just like squeezing by, you like just decide to turn around and go around the next aisle, hoping
Yeah, for
nobody's
real.
there.
Exactly. It's so weird. This is just such a weird time. And it's
Yeah.
so pervasive.
Well, and beyond that, it's like, I'm at home, and what, I get creative, but then it's like, oh, also, I'll watch TV or something for a while. We've been watching Tiger King, um,
Of course.
as many people have been watching right now. And there was like, we were watching an episode, and Joe Exotic, the main character, was like at a rally, um, and he's shaking hands with people, and I like kind of like tensed up for a second. I was like, oh, don't shake their hands.
you
Like
know,
media context is so different right now
yeah.
for just feeling like
Well, like
we're in such a weird state.
yeah, all of the videos that I see online of like, you know, people interacting or like doing funny things on like places like Reddit or Instagram or Twitter or wherever. Um, you have to have some sort of like contextual explanation like, oh, this happened,
Yeah,
in
3 months
January,
ago. Yeah,
or this happened, last year or something like that, so that people
yeah.
don't get up in arms about people having contact with one another. It's just such an unusual time. So, yeah, I don't know
Although
what to
there
do
are
with
the
it.
weirdos who are having coronavirus parties in their homes with more like, yeah, it, blows my mind. But
Hey, man,
this is a Star Wars podcast, so
maybe we should, just like all kill one another. Maybe you hadn't thought about it that way.
I
I'm
mean,
just
there's
putting it
people
out there.
doing crazier stuff out there.
I'm sure the
Uh,
Knights of Ren would have been very against complying with the social distancing order. I
oh yeah,
expect they probably would have gone out and started coughing on people and filming it. So
they would have had to take their masks off for that.
they would have, and they probably would have enjoyed it because
Yeah,
they're that evil.
little freedom, probably sweaty, grown out hair, kind of DiCaprio Man in the Iron Mask situation going on underneath there.
Not to follow another rabbit trail, but DiCaprio would have had way more acne and like cystic acne, like the big
Oh,
stuff,
for sure,
pulling that
especially
mask
during
off.
those times.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, the Knights of Ren have got something gross going on under there.
Oh, for sure. Unless they got some weird like Bacta, like maybe
More
it
like
like
Bacne.
uh, shoots in a little Bacta, keeps their skin nice and clean. I don't know. Um, so relative to things going on, the Star Wars world hasn't been terribly, nothing too much new going on. We are still, Disney got it right on that they're releasing weekly episodes of Clone Wars during all of
Oh,
this.
it's great. Yeah.
So, we got that going for us. However,
Yes. However.
our last conversation was I got a little bit heated about how the show's been going recently. So we'll get to that here in a bit for sure. We
Yeah.
we did get some other sort of Star Wars news this week that for me is always a point of excitement. Hasbro did some announcements of some new Black Series and Vintage Collection figures. I love the Vintage Collection. I've kind of moved away from it, basically just kind of gone with the 6-inch figures these days, just because that's where I spent my money.
Yeah.
And so I was excited. They announced Admiral Ackbar, which is one figure I've been very excited to have. They've actually done an Admiral Ackbar figure, but they did a Resistance version of him from Force Awakens that was part of a 2-pack a couple years ago. But this is like classic Return of the Jedi in his like sort of white, weird with like off-white vest from the Mon Cala cruiser in Return of the Jedi. So that's a cool one to have. Another great one they announced is Tebow, the Ewok.
Oh, very nice.
He's the guy that's got the little kind of like bird-looking skeleton hat on his head,
Yeah.
like kind of the witch doctor thing going on. And they announced Mando in his Beskar.
Mando.
So, of course, all the people who is like, I'm part of this community of Black Series collectors and people who, mod their own figures and stuff. And of course, everybody's been like sharing 3D files of Mando's Beskar armor to like modify their figure. And then now they're like, here's a whole other figure that just has that
Oh
already on
no.
it. But no, it's cool that just like the community does that kind of stuff, and especially right now when people are like those communities are so active of people working on in-home projects. This one guy in our Facebook group, he has built a 12th scale like kind of Tatooine village that is roughly the size, I think, it's like about as basically as tall as a mattress, maybe a little taller than a mattress, and somewhere between like 4 feet by 5 feet. It's huge.
Dude, that's
Like
massive.
this little village. Such cool stuff that people are doing with that, and using their time for right now.
Man, that's awesome.
Um, and then when Triple Force Friday happened last year, they started this new line called the Carbonized Figures, and which I picked up 2 of them. I picked up Mando and a Jet Trooper.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Those, and yeah, they've got this kind of like pearlescent paint on it, which is pretty neat. So they announced 2 new carbonized figures coming out, which will be Boba Fett and Stormtrooper. So, which the Boba Fett, like, is neat, but I love the Boba Fett that our buddy got us from Comic-Con, kind of that classic,
Yeah.
like really hyper intense colors. But the Stormtrooper I think was pretty neat because it's basically silver Stormtrooper. So
Yeah, kind of like a Phasma, but a little bit more muted, it looks like, and
yeah,
more
yeah,
matte. And I
hmm
think it looks pretty sweet.
yeah, something I'm looking forward to for sure. However, um, to put out in the universe, amidst all this COVID, I actually did lose my job. So trying to not spend my
Yeah,
money
for
on that
real.
stuff right now. So thankfully, those things have not been released. Um, and I'm trying to avoid going to stores anyway right now. So that's even better.
Yeah, it's easier to not make like impulse purchases when you're not actually in any stores. So
Yeah. Yeah. So while I've been indoors, I've been putting out a lot of like fan art. I've been looking at a lot of the classic Drew Struzan posters, and it was just kind of like I've always really wanted to sort of capture that style um, in some of my fan art, and I ended up in probably about 4 or 5 days cracked out like the whole sequel trilogy as posters.
yeah, and they look
Um,
great.
Thanks, man. I was really, those are like, it was one of those things that at one point I was like sitting on the couch while my wife is playing Animal Crossing. Because that's her fixation right now
I don't think
amidst
she's the only
the
one.
quarantine. She's not. The fact that you can't find any of them in stores is is it a testament to the Switch console being like the go-to quarantine tool.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I just like looked there. I was like, why am I was like, this is totally just for me. Like this is all for me right now, just to practice in design. But no, I totally love like getting to kind of like recreate a style, but doing it of something that I really love. So it's like a total passion project, spending hours on something that is for me, and I love sharing with people. And then I did a poster for The Mandalorian as well, and then recently I did Rogue One. And I was working on this. I always like as I'm like studying these characters because I spend like an hour looking at each character, cutting them out basically and working on the design, this, that, and the other. Of realizing again that Bodhi Rook is the only like main cast of like the Rogue One crew that doesn't have an action figure in the Hasbro line of like 6-inch figures.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the Disney Store released one of their like God, what were they called? They did like a line where they were die cast 6-inch
Uh-huh.
figures, and they released him in that one. He looked like garbage. Um, but yeah, he never got one. Saw Gerrera didn't get one either. But yeah, I was like, Baze, Chirrut, uh, Jin, and Cassian and K2 all have figures. Nothing for Bodhi. So
That's rough.
I'm hoping they'll like now since a lot of the like facial printing and stuff is better. I hope they'll go back and revisit some of those characters who like it's kind of a shame that he doesn't get the love that he deserves, in my opinion. But um,
Well, who knows what we'll get in the coming couple years with
yeah,
there being more like interludes right now, and then if
yeah,
production gets pushed back and stuff, maybe they start producing a few of those um, characters that have not gotten the attention that some people would want them to get.
yeah. I kind of didn't think about that, like filling the gaps as far as we've kind of been so reliant on like merchandising releases being based on what the new upcoming media was, and being that we don't have another movie for 2.5,
To
almost three
three,
years,
yeah,
is
and that's if everything goes right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, if being that film productions have halted and stuff right now, you know, that could for sure limit.
Well, the cascade effect could be, significant. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just movies now that are going to be,
Yeah.
pushed back with respect to their uh, their actual release
Release
date, but everything that's supposed to be filmed and produced right now either get
can't
canceled
can't
or
get
pushed
done.
back.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, that's cameras. It's not like these people own all the cameras that they're using. They rent them out.
hmm
So, who are the people who are going to get to rent these out? Is it people who, scheduled it for, August, or the people who scheduled it for, now,
yeah.
and are
Right.
now going to film in August because they're not going to get to film right now. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it has a
yeah.
waterfall effect that,
It's a
will
big
have impact for a long
butterfly
time.
effect there for sure. Yeah. No, the problems created are pretty wild. Um, Speaking of which, production. I forgot there was some mentions. So we recently talked about Rosario Dawson being kind of unofficially um, cast as Ahsoka. There was also mentioned that Michael Biehn, who many people know him from the Terminator, the original Terminator, that he was seen on set
Yep.
of The Mandalorian as well. Um, and apparently Jamie Lee Curtis was seen on set at some point too.
Which is something that I would love because I'm a big fan of hers and have been since I was a kid. So,
Yeah, True Lies. I understand.
you know, you think you know a guy.
So yeah, it's hard to say kind of where that season's headed and what because we don't have any official announcements from Disney right now, so it's kind of hard to say like what's what.
Where do we go
Um,
from here?
where do we go from here? So then also we got some word on the new High Republic stuff. Previously, Project Luminous.
Yeah, we did.
Um, we got some new characters that we had seen their artwork before, but now we have some names and a little bit of description to go
Yeah,
with
we
some
got
of them.
blurbs, but everybody, we got blurbs.
You want to talk about some of these blurbs?
Sure, yeah. So Avar Chris is looks like a female character, and she's kind of like our new, I guess, like our analogy would be like a Luke Skywalker in some ways, I guess. The
Mm-hmm.
way we look at the old books, she's like very optimistic, is highly talented, is kind of out like on the front edge of everything that's going on, exploring the galaxy, just like renowned. Everybody knows who she is and has a reputation. And in some ways, reading about that, it made me think about Luke and the Jedi Academy books. Just like
Oh
out,
yeah,
yeah, out on adventures, doing stuff, breaking new ground, and everybody knows his name everywhere he goes. In some way, the longer he's out there doing this stuff, and so that's kind of what that made me think of. And so I think she's obviously going to be a pretty significant player going forward. And then and she's I think just a Jedi Knight. I don't think she's a Jedi Master.
yeah. It
They're
says
not that
Jedi Hood, so yeah, they
yeah
haven't given a
yeah they're not
title
that
on that.
specific on these, so I don't want to like say she isn't, but it looks like she's probably just a knight out doing knight stuff.
Yeah,
Then we've got Loden Greatstorm, who, if you couldn't
which I
tell by the
love.
name, is a
I love this
Twi'lek.
name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a great name. Which I just think it like really hits the Twi'lek naming convention well, and is a little bit like
something medieval
like
about it.
medieval. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And so because we're moving back in time, I think playing on that either medieval or even Renaissance era, it will get some
yeah.
sort of interplay between those two. We don't know exactly what aesthetic it's going to take, but I think it falls in one of those two worlds, and so that name is really great. And he's a Jedi Master, and is kind of like the renowned teacher. In some ways kind of sounds like a Yoda.
Yoda figure. Yeah,
Yeah. And so it's a Twi'lek, and it looks like maybe a little bit of a green tinge or a blue tinge to his skin there. So, if it's green, maybe we're even closer to a Yoda. I don't know.
and it looks like he's got a yellow lightsaber too.
Yes, he does. Which I think, on the record saying, like a yellow or bronze lightsaber is one of my favorites because of Lobaka
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
books having a bronze lightsaber. And then Keeve Trennis, not to be confused with Steve Tennis, who I just invented and made up right now.
Or
Um,
Keanu Reeves for that
yeah.
matter.
So Keeve is like a young, up and coming Jedi, um, and kind of sounds like a little bit of a um, maybe a person who might dabble with falling to the dark side some, and we'll see some like internal struggle, a less defined kind of like path in front of her
Yeah.
in some of these books. And so, we might get a lot of self discovery, and then through that, understanding of the force as well, as we see her go through these struggles. And it seems like there's just like largely a lack of trust in herself rather than a trust in the force, or the Jedi in general,
Yeah.
which I think is an interesting play on this, because often what we see is a lack of faith in the Jedi Order or a master, or potentially the Force, the light side of the Force in general, when we see people struggling historically in these books and in the movies. And so I think this is maybe a new take on the kind of struggle that a Jedi might have, which I think is really interesting. You might be able to find some of that with, I guess, um, a couple of the characters in Rebels, um, maybe a little bit of that from Ahsoka, but I think the
Hmm.
way I'm reading this, it's going to be way more pronounced in this character than we've seen it before. And then we've got Stellan. I think it's Geos is probably how that's going to be pronounced, and he is kind of
He's a pretty
our,
boy.
yeah, he's kind of our like male version of the Avar Chris character, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit less of a focus probably, but a Jedi Knight, or a Jedi. Well, he's actually a Jedi Master who's really really well respected. People know him, they love him, but he's a little bit more stationary in the galaxy. Really strong in the Force, and probably more so um, like a strong, steady rock in the stream than
Yeah. Keep to the
somebody
rules
riding
kind
the
of guy.
rapids. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so apparently he and Avar Chris are like a really dynamic duo when they get together. And so we'll get to see some of them, going on adventures together, it sounds like. And I think that that's obviously been, like a mainstay of the movies, is, multiple Jedi going together
Yeah.
on adventures. Um, and
And
so I think we'll get some really strong pieces of that going forward. And I think his character looks, the way they've drawn him, kind of like like you said, like a pretty boy.
he's a pretty
So
boy. His outfit kind of makes me think of like something from like the Crusades
yeah, yeah.
kind of thing
And
too.
he's
And
the one with the hilt on his saber too.
it has a little crossguard saber, but not like Kylo's, that it has extra quillons, whatever crap you pronounce that. But
Yeah,
they're just like actual guard
like
on there.
Durasteel or something like that,
Hmm.
whatever it is. But yeah, it's got that interesting little crossguard there. So, which once again, plays on that medieval or Renaissance era, um, type of aesthetic that we think we're going to be getting. And then we've got Vernestra, or Vern, and I'm going to butcher this probably, Ro or Ro. Um, and she's a new Jedi Knight. She's like the youngest Jedi Knight in generations. She's only 16. And so I think this is kind of going to be our Ahsoka type character,
Yeah.
um, young, highly capable, still lots of internal growth and struggle with being recognized for the talent that she is in some ways, while also being given um, a lot of accolades and attention and otherwise. Um, it's like an interesting, like, kind of dual nature to her existence, most likely, where she'll have this push and pull with other Jedi to be, ultimately recognized and put on the same playing field. But at the same time, she has been given, you know, this acknowledgement and um, position of being a Jedi Knight, long before she ought to have been. And so it's kind
Yeah.
of an interesting dual nature there that will, I think, be fun to play on and kind of tease out there. But she looks, very young in the way that
Oh
they've
yeah,
drawn her, and very
for
like
sure.
vulnerable. But you know that she's going to end up being probably like a real bad A when it comes to combat and
For
stuff.
sure.
So
I was, as we were talking about that and saying, she's 16, being a Jedi Knight. Kind of thinking an interesting sort of storyline to play with is like, this is 200 years prior to Phantom Menace, and like, maybe with sort of the involvement of the Republic itself, like maybe there's been some input from the Republic of like, our legal drinking age has changed, within our lifetime, kind of thing of maybe they set some boundaries of like somebody like her and other people, it's like that's too young, like maybe a Jedi Knight shouldn't be allowed such freedoms until a much older age or something like that.
yeah,
And obviously, that's different species by species, but like maybe something kind of in the realm of that, of her being a case of the council even kind of looking at like maybe we're letting them take on too much too early, kind of thing, and sheltering, which ultimately can kind of lead to where we end up in the prequel trilogy of
yeah,
you know the control that the council wants to have on or the Jedi in general, how it's not that they mean to control people, they feel like they got to put certain rules in place to prevent going to the dark side and that kind of thing. So
yeah. Which is interesting, because a lot of the time when those kinds of hard and fast rules exist,
mhm.
it's as a result of fear,
Yeah.
fear and like desire for control, so that you can protect people from themselves or potential negative outcomes. And what is one thing that the Jedi are not supposed to be is
Is
fearful.
yeah.
And so it's interesting. You see that kind of thing possibly cropping up, and it's like, well, you're institutionalizing fear in a way,
Hmm.
and caving to it. So rather than dealing with things on a case by case basis, listening to the Force, being wise in that, but also allowing for flexibility. They've kind of like fallen um, prey to this like undermining of the Jedi Order at that point, potentially, if that's a direction that they go in. So
Yeah. We'll see. I'm anxious to see Kevin Scott, who's one of the writing some of the material for the High Republic. Um, he's been posting a lot on like Instagram and social media of in quarantine you got I'm sure a lot of time on your hands to do
oh yeah,
stuff like he's doing, and so like he's been posting pictures of like different Star Wars books and stuff that he's been reading, and he'll be like today's research and stuff like that. So it's
oh
kind of
I
like
love that. I love that
interesting
attitude.
seeing what books he's like taking and kind of thinking about the concepts of where some of this stuff's going to be going.
Well, I'm excited for it, man. This is
Woo.
I think going to open some doors. And one thing that I was thinking about earlier today is just whether or not it's going to be very easy to dive in on these characters for the general public. I'm really curious to see what they do with um, the media that we're getting surrounding this. My assumption is that fairly soon after we get these books, they're going to want to capitalize on building out this portion of the universe by making live action films.
Hmm.
That may be a premature prognostication, but I think it makes sense to support the one with the other, whichever you
Yeah,
want to
no, for
say
sure.
is supporting the other. Kind of depends on your perspective, I guess. But I think that that would work well, um, to kind of like build a new era, a new lore that they can fill out for the next 10 or 15 years potentially. Who knows how long they they will do that. But I was wondering, whether or not that's something that people would be able to just easily dive in on. And I was
Yeah.
kind of, pondering on that. And I think that, our
Having a totally
experience.
new starting point in something that we already know.
Exactly. I think our experience with the Darth Bane books is probably the closest that I could get in analogizing, kind of what might occur. And I
Yeah.
think that our experience was really positive there. Like, we love the Darth Bane books. They were written well. They built out their characters well.
They built on you know, the structure of things going on at the time too,
Exactly.
like very efficiently. That was
And
actually
so
one
that
of the
I found
books
that
that
encouraging.
Cavan posted the other day.
Oh, really? Interesting.
He posted, yeah, the first book. Um, that one he didn't. He was like, and now for a bit of reading for pleasure, is what he said with that one.
Ah,
So
well, I wonder, whether or not that kind of tells us that it won't be that difficult for those of us who are Star Wars obsessed to
hmm
jump into a new era, because we obviously love those books and those really stuck with me. And I think that so long as they're written well, this new era can be the same thing for us. And I think that other people that are not Star Wars fanatics will, they're just fans of the films and go when they come out. I think they'll be able to enjoy that as well. So
yeah,
I'm encouraged. I think that this could be a very good new era for Star Wars, and the fact that it isn't on the Skywalker trajectory,
yeah, it's on a
probably,
different plane that
yeah,
people can
provides some
judge
more
it.
freedom.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of have I think, be in a place where it's not judged with the weight of so many years behind it, kind of thing. That it can that era can maybe exist a little closer together in its creation. That we look at people who judge the Rise of Skywalker so harshly because they take the 40 years writing on it and like feel like it didn't meet the expectation that they want. And it's like, well, maybe now in this new generation we can have things that, like, because it's also fresh, it's also new, it can be something not not held to a certain standard, I guess, in
An
that way.
impossible standard. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I'm looking at, like, I know HBO is developing a spin-off Game of Thrones series that's essentially kind of what Star Wars is doing, that is supposed to take place like during the times of High Valyria, which is
Yeah.
funny that the similar name. That's like the golden era of the Dragon Riders. Um, so to see, how does an audience receive something in a world that they love, but with not necessarily a lot of the things that they fell in love with it for. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I mean, it changes our relationship to the story. And
yeah,
I think that's something that is, kind of incontrovertible, but I also think it's something that's good. I think it'll be healthy, um, to see those kinds of changes, um, from just the way we as fans approach it. And, I just, I think that, um, we as a fandom have gotten too close to it in some ways. And I'm reminded of that, this week. Even I've got a good friend who, um, I've known since we were in high school, and he did, film for a good long while, um, in college, and then was working for a couple studios post graduation out in LA for a few years, and is somebody whose opinion I really respect when it comes to movies. And he hadn't seen Star Wars Episode 9 yet, and just saw it this week for the first time. And his take was that, on a scale out of 10, he would give it a 7.5. And he was like, it's not the terrible movie that people have made it out to be, and it's not this perfect film from a, critical filmmaking
yeah,
standpoint either. And it's allowed to be a 7.5, and that's good. And
oh yeah,
that's actually
yeah,
a good movie. It's not the best movie, but not all of the movies that we see can be that. Basically was his
yeah,
attitude. And I was like, you know what, you're right. Like I love it because of, X, Y, and Z reasons we've gone through a million times on here. But now I've become protective of it as well because there's been such like
Hmm.
a negative response
Yeah,
from so many
yeah.
people, and I've become very dismissive of a lot of people as a result of it. Um, whether or not that's fair, I don't know. But hearing his perspective on it, I was like, this is very refreshing for me, and I think that that's probably how all of us, Star Wars freaks and non-Star Wars freaks, will be able to engage with the movies that are coming soon to a theater near you, maybe, hopefully one day. And
Will theaters even exist anymore?
you know, I know I'm going to spend all of my time doing the things that I can't do right now. One of those is sitting in movie theaters. So get ready to take my money, AMC, and I'm sure I'll give you plenty of it. But I'm encouraged.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's to looking forward. Now we will take a little look back here in the last couple weeks. On the previous episode of our show, um, I kind of aired my grievances about episode five, six.
And it wasn't even Festivus.
Yeah. Episode 5 of the Clone Wars season 7, which was Gone with a Trace. We have
Yep.
since had 2 more episodes, and it looks like the closing of this arc will be airing um, when this episode is out. But so we've had 2 episodes. We had Deal No Deal, which was episode 6, and then most recently Dangerous Debt. Um, what are your thoughts? So I guess because I've got feelings about each episode
You got
individually.
feelings.
I got
Um,
feelings.
you know, I think that I think they're wasting our time.
I'm I so here's where, okay, so episode 2 of the arc, Deal No Deal, I felt a little less, I felt a little more into it, like, okay, we're seeing even it's Rafa and Trace, yeah, that I felt like Trace's, what she was dealing with in the episode was like, I was getting a little more out of her being kind of having the bickering characters of Rafa and Ahsoka around her, like kind of building on her character. At the same time, I'm like, okay, this is a character who's been kind of nobody to us, and then all of a sudden, like we want to build on her. That's neither here nor there, but um, it came to the next episode when I felt like my time was really wasted.
Yeah,
And it's because, for those of you who watched the episode, our episode begins at the end of the previous episode. They had flown off, but then were ultimately captured by the Pikes. Um, they had dumped the spice that they were asked to get, or Trace rather dumped the spice because she couldn't deal with the feuding of Ahsoka and Rafa, and so they're captured by the Pikes. So the episode starts with them in a Pike holding cell, and the episode ends with them in a Pike holding cell.
yeah,
However, the rest of the episode deals with them escaping and having their freedom and then getting back in the cell. And I was kind of like, all right, so I feel like that went in a circle.
yeah. I mean, basically, this episode gives us a 30-second. So, Dangerous Debt. Sorry, there are 2 episodes.
Yeah, yeah,
Dangerous Debt gives us a 30-second little glimpse of people that matter.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah,
in the Mandalorians, who for some reason are present, um, in this on this planet where the Pikes are, and there's something alluded to. They're there for their own reason. Are the 3 morons who can't make a simple spice drop going to cause them problems? Basically, is all that they're
yeah,
concerned about, and they recognize Ahsoka, and that's 30 seconds of the episode, and we assume that that's setting up something about the Mandalorians going forward. Um, I mean, I, like we've said before, in a normal season, these episodes aren't something that like break our back and you don't like
Yeah,
hate them,
yeah,
and it tells you more about Ahsoka, it tells you more about her character development. Like those are all good things in general in storytelling, right? Well, now like we know Ahsoka. She doesn't need to learn the things that she's like learning here, right? She
yeah.
already knows that the Jedi Order kind of screwed stuff up and was not connected to the people and had
That was
lost their way in
part
some.
of why she left. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like, okay, we already did this, guys.
we're
So
just getting more reasons now, like, finding out about Trace and Rafa's parents being, killed by a Jedi accident, basically, and it's
yeah,
nothing exactly. It's new things we're learning for those characters, but yeah, nothing too nothing out of the ordinary that what we've seen for the character going forward. Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with you
And
there.
and so I'm just like, okay, so we've got um 5 episodes left, and that's enough time to jump into stuff that's gonna like matter, but we know we're getting at least one more episode of getting away from the Pikes,
Yeah,
um,
which
and
sounds like it'll
potentially
kind of be like the Mandalorians into like stepping in to help them out of their situation.
exactly.
So,
And then we move
which I
forward somehow. And I'm just disappointed ultimately. I don't hate
yeah
these episodes for what they are
yeah
as a self-contained little storyline at all. But I just don't feel uh,
we're not moving
like a
forward
lot
the
of
way
it.
we need to be.
Yeah, like I don't feel a lot of enjoyment from these episodes because of like the situation in which we find ourselves.
Yeah, you're
Um,
looking at the clock. You're like, okay, we only have this much time. We have some things we need to get to here, guys.
yeah, I think that you know time will look on these more favorably in the context of seasons 1 through 6. But as a self-contained season that's going on right now, I'm just
Yeah,
not loving it. And I think the Pikes are cool, and I like seeing Ahsoka have to figure out how to
fight
engage
without a
with
lightsaber, and
society, yeah, without being exposed as a Jedi.
yeah,
Like that's cool, I guess. But to have that in the context of a storyline that's um, ultimately inconsequential is a little bit frustrating as we sit here getting no sports, getting to not go and see our friends, knowing that production on TV shows and movies that we care about are being pushed back. Say, all right, guys, this is like all I'm getting right now of like new content, um, particularly in the Star Wars world, much less everything else. And so,
yeah.
like, you got to give me more than this. And I know that this existed outside of the framework of um,
The global
yeah,
situation.
the global situation, and even outside of the context of this being the last season and things
Yeah,
like that. A lot of
yeah,
this was predetermined, um, but still I'm like meh.
yeah. It's still like a beautiful show to watch. I love the
Yeah,
visuals of it, and
I mean, the
um,
animation is just, it's really well done. It's drawn well, the color contrast is good. I mean, everything about it that I would complain about Rebels for like failing me in some way.
yeah,
I think Clone Wars does well.
yeah. A guy got decapitated in this last episode too. So,
Yeah,
like,
yep,
there you go.
that was intense.
I wanted to see his head.
I thought the body was gonna fall. Yeah,
Yeah, I thought something was gonna like fall into frame afterwards. I was like, just do it. Come on. You guys did worse things in like seasons 3 and 4. Come
yeah,
on, do it.
yeah, they did.
What can you do? What can you do? So yeah, I guess the next episode is called Together Again. The one after that is Old Friends Not Forgotten. So I imagine this will be that will probably be our meeting point for um, Anakin and Ahsoka, kind of bringing her back into the war. Would be my guess where we get that, because then after that is the Phantom Apprentice. Um, so I imagine that's part of our Mandalore, um, beginning of our Mandalore arc. If I were to guess, I was kind of uh, giving my complaints to my wife uh, the other day about the latest episode, and she's like, "Well, I mean, I know you're not enjoying those episodes, but they might do more." I was like, "I don't think that's gonna happen." I was like, "They said it's the final season, and the show like overlaps with Revenge of the Sith, so I don't see that being a thing."
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even want them to do more.
Yeah, yeah.
I would prefer they go in a different direction and
Hmm.
support Project Luminous if they're going to do
Yeah,
more
I
animation.
think a new animated show within that era, I think would be a cool next thing. I know they were because I applied for one of these jobs that they were hiring people in the animation department for like project based work for a new project. So I'm guessing something is in the works, whether that is part of the Project Luminous stuff or um,
Well, I heard that they're going to make
who knows.
an adult animated TV show called 50 Shades of Raylo.
Oh
So,
boy. Oh boy. I would, I mean, I know in a lot of ways people want to kind of move away from the Skywalker era. I think it would be interesting to get a kind of Jedi Academy series
oh
out of
yeah,
Luke for this time, and kind of see they've been doing it a little bit with the Rise of Kylo Ren comic series, but it would be kind of cool to see some of um, even start the show. I think what actually would be a neat way to kind of start a show like that is, now that we've seen what happens with Leia and Ben, to almost start the series with Luke training Leia, and like where her training begins, and like by the end of the first episode basically get the flashback that we got in Rise of Skywalker, and then to like jump forward to um, his new trainees and stuff. Um,
yeah, to get
with
the good
with
times.
Ben. So.
Yeah, get the good times in there. That's one thing that we've kind of missed
Hmm.
out of the sequel trilogy. Uh, there were good times. There were years where it wasn't awful, and so
Yeah.
to see some of that, some of the Republic kind of like reviving itself, and
Hmm.
seeing the Solos happy and Luke happy prior to Ben having his fall, I think would be an interesting time to look at, because that is a lot of what the books were.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like very human, regular struggles that these people went through, small problems that they had to solve throughout the galaxy.
Dealing with some corruption and
Yeah,
crime syndicates here and there, but yeah, nothing. I mean, the Yuzon Vong was pretty on a pretty large scale, but
yeah, but that's not every book.
yeah,
That
exactly.
was out there, but it wasn't the Emperor, it wasn't Vader, it wasn't
Yeah,
the
this
fight for Luke's
enormous
soul.
email. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, it would be nice to see some happy times for sure. But I guess people are. I guess if you take the wars out of it, then you're just left with stars, and
Well,
you can look through that through a telescope, and that's cheaper. So
yeah. Well, I think ultimately that the most viable TV show that we could have would be a Cheers like show based on Coruscant. It's effectively a shot for shot remake of Cheers,
there you go.
except with Star Wars characters on Coruscant. So let's get it on the board, and let's get going, guys. Come on, J.J. Abrams. I've
Boom.
got a project for you. You're gonna love it.
I'm down. Well, yep. You heard it right here. If we get a Cheers related Star Wars show in the future, you know where they stole the idea from, and we're not mad. We just want a little recognition.
I just want to get to be a an extra on the
There you
show,
go.
really.
Yeah.
So
Even if it's animated, little voice sneak in there. So like, okay, you can sample our podcast in the background
that would be
as
great. Yeah.
background noise. There, I like that idea. Well, thank you everybody again for joining us during this time of great chaos and um, you know, help someone out where you can. And if that means staying inside, well, then do that and listen to the backlog of our show. Um, and I brought this up earlier. You can also listen to my other podcast that I've recently started called Add to Queue. You can find it on Spotify and iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called these days. I don't remember. It's a movie podcast where I am going through basically this backlog of movies that my wife has never seen that I feel like she needs to, and sitting her down to before the movie, we kind of discuss what she does or does not know about going into it, and then afterwards, kind of talk about the movie in context of when it came out, behind the scenes about the movie, this, that, and the other. So, boom, shameless plug for myself. There
I
you
love it. That's awesome.
go. Well, may the force be with you. You know where to find us. Force Cult on all the social platforms. I'm at AKA Star Wars Kid on everything. Jip is mostly just focused on the Twitters at Darth Legalis. Although with all the time he's had on his hands, I don't know what he's been up to.
I've been doing a lot of baking, like a lot of other
Ooh,
people,
my
and
wife has too. Yeah,
I've been spending a lot of time on the freshloaf.com forums, and so you can
that sounds
find
like.
me on the freshloaf.com, posting under the handle Darth Focaccia. So it's out there.
I got it. I got it. That's a good one. Well, go make some bread, listen to our show, have
And
a
try
great
not to go
week,
insane.
and try not to go crazy. May the force be with you.